Thank you for joining us tonight. Welcome to Speak Up, the television arm of Freemasonry throughout New Zealand. I am Barry Rushton, your host, and we have a great show for you. The theme tonight is music, and I couldn't have two more totally diverse Freemasons, both musicians, as my guests. They are at the opposite ends of the music spectrum. My first guest is Eddie Giffney, a young Freemason and a PhD student in music at the University of Auckland, who is entrenched in the classical traditions of composition and performance, i.e. that is classical music. And my second guest is an emerging rap artist with a new album, a new record deal, and a career that is about to explode on the modern scene. Freemason Rich James. Rounding out the program, of course, is our regular contributor, Graham Houston. He is continuing the music theme with the life of a famous musical Freemason. And I can't wait to hear who he's going to talk about. Our first guest this evening is a young man who is studying for a Doctor of Musical Arts. Welcome, Eddie Giffney. Nice to see you. Nice to see you. Let me get this straight. Now, first of all, to study for a PhD, you've got to do a master's, basically, a bachelor's first, then a master's, and then get into the actual PhD program. Mm-hmm. So you've done a bachelor's with honours, right? Mm-hmm. So that's 4 years.
Yep.
Then you've done the master's, which is another year onto that.
Mm-hmm. Then I did a bonus master's.
A bonus master's
overseas.
There, right? And now you're 1.5 years into the 3-year program for a PhD. You must have started when you were about 12.
Mate, something like that.
25. Congratulations, sensational. Now it's all classical music. You love classical music. You've been involved in classical music for forever, obviously. Mm-hmm. Tell me why you just love classical music.
Yeah, well, I started, as many children do, at about, I started when I was 6, and I loved my local piano teacher, Jackie Pittman. She really gave me a love of music, and I just adored the piano from when I first started playing. And then that love has grown into a career, and it sort of has become the only thing that I can do by this point. So
that's fantastic. Now, I guess, well, I've got this feeling that you're one of those absolutely annoying people who can play everything. Is that what's your main instrument? The things that you love?
Everything with a keyboard, maybe.
Everything with a keyboard.
Put me near a guitar, and I won't have nearly as much luck as you. But I play the piano. Yep. Then I play historical keyboards. So that's a harpsichord and clavichord and forte piano. So that's early versions of keyboard instruments. Then I play, my other main instrument is the piano accordion. Beautiful.
You know, and you may do this as well, but there is an instrument that I just love, and that's the church organ, the big, the thundering pipes of a church organ. Do you ever get tempted to race into one of those places?
I've played a bit of chamber organ, but I've never really learnt the pedal technique. It's a whole nother beast.
Now, as you get through this next 1.5 years and you're done, all right, as your thoughts going to what kind of a job you're looking for, where you're going to go?
Yeah, well, one of the big reasons to do a doctorate in music is to go into lecturing. So that's my eventual hope. Okay. It's quite unusual to come straight out of a PhD into a lecturing position, but it's possible. So the other options are perhaps going into some kind of postdoctorate type work, or going into a more performance career and recording the sort of normal musician type career before going into that.
Well, that's the sort of thing that I thought you might have said, because a lot of PhD people will go in to be a teacher, so that's sort of in your direction. Do you see a bridge then in between getting out of school, okay, out of varsity, into something? Is there a bridge that you can see? Are you making inroads already to make that happen?
Well, fingers crossed with the research side of things for lecturing positions, but the obvious inroads are in terms of performance and teaching, because you're kind of naturally, you start teaching just as a way of making some kind of living as you're kind of studying, and even perhaps before then, some people start teaching. I think I started teaching even at secondary school. So you've sort of had this process of having pupils for a long time, so it's just upgrading that to having university pupils, which is what I started to do now during my doctorate.
Which is fantastic. So also too, you know, when you come to the end of your degree, 1.5 years, is there one big thing that you're going to tackle before you sort of get into real life? I mean, are you going to trip around the world? Are you going to
definitely it'd be nice to have a bit more travel. I've always sort of joked that I'll get the doctorate and then go bum off playing on cruise ships for a while. And
Well, it's good that you mentioned that, because we're a fan of modern music, and I'm sure you are too. But Van Morrison had an album out recently called Born to Sing, No Plan B. Is there a plan B that you have stuck in your life after this year and a half?
I don't know if I have a plan B that doesn't involve music.
Okay.
Yeah, so my plan Bs would be all music related things. I love teaching children music, so I spent a while teaching through Sistema Aotearoa, which is a program in Otara that teaches children in Decile 1 schools to play string instruments, and now they're learning woodwind instruments as well. So I love teaching school-aged pupils, and particularly in a situation like that, and so I could see myself doing something like that. But years ago, my dad sort of pushed me quite strongly to do an accounting conjoint at university, and I sort of may have pushed back then. So since then, perhaps not.
So from the age, as I said, about 12 when you got going, have you been out ever at all busking on the streets? Have you ever had a go at it?
Yeah, I used to busk all the time.
Did you really?
Particularly around Christmas. I mean, if you're 11 and 12 and you put on a little Santa hat and play on Franklin Road, your kids they're bringing in $120 an hour. And if I know what that meant then, now, I'd be out all the time.
How did it make you feel when you had the audience who stopped and waited, and they were right there close to you, as close as I? How did it make you feel? Did you play? How's the feeling?
Well, it's a rarity that anyone stops and listens, I would say. So but when it does happen, it's a sort of this unusual thing that you actually might have an audience. But I'd say even perhaps if you're like playing at a farmer's market or something, then you'll have people stop and listen. But if you're just playing on the street, it would happen, very rarely.
Very rarely.
Yeah.
During your time through the university, you've had many teachers, I'm sure. Have there been many or any that have been quite dogmatic and said, look, you don't play that way, play like this, or have there been some who've tried to encourage you to develop your own style? Is that something in the back of your mind?
Yeah, definitely. I think there's always, perhaps at first when you're just sort of starting out, they might be more prescriptive in terms of what you need to do to develop a healthy technique that's able to play lots of tricky pieces. Yeah. But then as you get further along, then there's definitely an element of trying to make you into an individual musician who got something to say.
Added to that, of course, there would be some teachers who you really admire. You mentioned your piano teacher right from the beginning, So when you're playing yourself, whether it be to a little concert or being, are the words of those favourite teachers sort of ringing in your ears or sitting on your shoulders? Is there something you feel that you're doing that they'd be proud of as well?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, I think that it's a good way of, because when you're doing something like playing music or, I guess anything really where it's trying to do something very complicated at a reasonably high level, there's always a bit of nerves or a lot of nerves depending on just how serious the performance occasion is. And so you do need some kind of mantra or something to sort of come back to that you're going to think about and that's going to keep you calm. So
one thing that's been on my mind, do you think yourself you might need to be open to other music styles to be sort of relevant in 2019, 2020, especially if you go on a cruise ship or something? Think you're playing ragtime or something?
I'm not sure, but I mean there are definitely classical music tours on cruise ships. I think there's two questions there. One is do you need to is classical music still relevant in 2019, 2020 and in the future? And audience numbers are not dropping as much as you might think. There are definitely people who are listening to classical music, and it's not only, if you go to the APO, NZSO concerts, perhaps there are a few more grey hairs than otherwise, but it's still got something to excite the younger generations, much like Freemasonry, I guess.
Yes, indeed.
But I have done quite a bit of jazz, because I play in show bands, and I played in particularly one production of Cabaret for about 3 months, where we played in sort of an hour-long jazz set before every performance.
What were you playing then?
I was playing accordion.
Accordion, yeah. Okay, great. Brings me on to the Freemason. You're a young Freemason, which is fantastic. As we know, we only have to look around and see that there are a number of young people joining. So you joined, obviously, the best lodge for you, because it's the Lodge of the Liberal Arts, right? And that has as the cornerstone a music theme, So who attracted you possibly into Freemasonry? Is it something that you tripped over yourself? Did someone say to you?
It was through Donald Trott. I met him through the New Zealand Opera School, where I was accompanying down at Wanganui, and he just had so many great stories, and I noticed his little lapel badge. I can't remember what he was wearing at the time. I think
like
it may
that
have
one,
been
I
this
think.
one.
Yeah.
And yeah, I asked him about it. And then the next Freemason that I ran into was Neil Ingram, who I met through Donald.
And lovely chap too.
Turned out that Neil was friends with my uncle, Colin Giffney, and so we kind of, you know, suddenly these two people who I'd already met and admired had something to do with Freemasonry.
Well, we were lucky. We had Donald Trott on this program a number of weeks back, and it was such a joy to have him here. You know, and he's such a lovely man. When you're actually in the lodge and they're doing a degree working, there is music in the words, isn't there? Do you pick that? Do you see it when you hear them? A good ritualist who's talking, you'll hear the music in the words.
Yeah, definitely.
It's incredible, isn't it?
And then there's obviously you have some great lodge music making as well with Brian Crone is often playing organ for us, and James is doing some music for us.
They're great stalwarts, aren't they?
Though I do think the brethren could, perhaps if we could squeeze in time for another choral rehearsal or two, might be even better.
Yeah, but your lodge is a great vocal lodge. It's a great vocal lodge.
Yeah.
Mate, we really wish you the best in your career and B, your time at the lodge, you know. And of course, when we look back, probably and hopefully maybe less than 10 years, and you're headlining somewhere. In fact, I had the pleasure of interviewing this young fellow. Eddie, nice seeing you. Thank you for being a great guest here with us today.
Thank you, Barry.
Thank you.
Say we did it, girl, I'm with it. If you with it, let me know. We could bump up 50s in
my second guest tonight is Rich James. It is absolutely great to have you here. You look fantastic. Now,
Thank you.
There's three reasons why I wanted you to come on the show tonight. You're a Freemason, which is obviously the prerequisite to be here. But the things that I love, of course, is that you are at the total end of the spectrum of what we baby boomers are comfortable with. We grew up with the Beatles and the Rolling Stones and so on, and now you're a rapper. And to be quite frank, we go, oh, gosh, what's that about? So that's the first thing. The second thing is, I mean, you just don't look like a Freemason. Now, what is Freemason supposed to look like?
What
but
are we meant to
honestly,
look like?
I mean, you're so different, but that's wonderful as well. And the third thing that I wanted to ask you about is that your involvement in Freemasonry, of course, will possibly tend to change the way that you might tend to write songs. I can't speak. Tell us a little bit how you started, how your life has been from the beginning.
Oh, my life has been, well, I was adopted. So I was born in the Philippines in a place called Pasay City in Manila. Just out in the slums. My mum's British, well, my adopted mum, and they sort of linked up with some like family friends and ended up getting me over here, and then fought like a 10-year battle to keep me here pretty much. Yeah, so I been in Auckland most of my life.
What age were you here when you arrived?
8 months old.
Oh, wow. Okay.
So just a little baby.
Absolutely. So this is home, obviously. Of course.
Yeah, it's all I know, really.
And Mum's still here?
Yep, she lives out west.
Great.
Just with the dogs.
And so then you, during the time, of course, we all do. You got to school, but then you got into a band. How did your evolution in music happen?
Yeah, music. Well, I started actually playing guitar about 11, 12 years old, and I grew up like really loving just punk music and hip hop. Really, so you talked about bands from the 70s and stuff. Like I grew up listening to that stuff, and then ended up playing in punk and hardcore bands throughout like my teenage years and early 20s. And it sort of transitioned into wanting to work solo, being also just really loving rap music and being able to express myself better in that way, and just transitioning into it over the last few years.
So basically, you'd be classified as being solo, right? You do stuff yourself with perhaps your producer.
Highly collaborative, with producers and other musicians and that, but very much like a solo artist.
Get around a couple times, say we did it, girl, I'm with it. If you with it, let me know. We could bump up 50s in my room here in the city, baby. I just want you with me in my zone.
Now, I know that you've got a stellar career ahead of you because I know things are changing for you, which is great. You've got a new album coming out, which we may talk about in a second, but also a couple of EPs that you've done previously, right?
Yeah.
So when you write the music, and I say music because it is difficult for us baby boomers to sort of, to know that. And I know it's unfair for me to say that, but so when you write these things, do you get the lyrics first? How do you put that together?
Well, I start with the actual music, so my producers, I'm learning to produce myself as well actually. I've been learning to play piano and that, but Yeah, start with the music, and then whatever that makes me feel, I'll turn that into lyrics and eventually get a song around it. So I record all my own stuff, I mix all my own music as well, so I have my own sound vocally and all of that. But yeah, the main thing is getting a beat and just feeling something and writing it.
So do you start with recorded music that's already out there, or are you putting the beats down yourself and adding to it?
Yeah, and we'll do them from scratch. So
From scratch.
you sit there, like we're in the digital age, where you have a program pretty much now, and you sit down as a producer and just
Put a beat in?
put a beat in, like,
Yeah.
and you, like fully from scratch. You make it, like everything will be set out. You have like whatever sounds you want. A lot of it's emulated from real life instruments, etc. And it's all just on a program digitally. So
Yeah. So you'll get the basic track down, or how you think it'll go,
yeah.
and then how it makes you feel or what you're thinking about, you will write the lyrics that are meaningful.
And that's where my lyricism comes from. So everything I write about is real personal, just experiences, what I'm feeling at the time, whatever the music is making me feel as well, and whatever I want to be saying at the time as well. So quite often I'll have maybe only one or two core themes really in a song that I actually want to get across, and everything else will be pretty words or whatever. But I always do have a bit of a purpose with what I'm doing.
Beautiful. So when you go on tour,
Yeah,
the
best part.
we've been in bands and gone on tour, you know, we sort of know what that means, setting up gear and stuff. So you come on and you just have like a sort of a big disc player.
Well, I got a
sort of.
DJ, that'll be doing all that stuff. I just get up and rap, but it's way different from loading in as a band.
Oh,
like
exactly.
we used to spend hour setups or whatever, loading in all the gear, getting all that. But now I just sort of rock up, have my set. One of my producers is my DJ as well, so we practice together. We have everything kind of ready to go. You just get some plugs and plays, really. So.
Really? Okay,
Yeah.
so he just plugs into the system.
Yep.
And you know what's coming, and then away you go.
Yeah, away we go. Super
Wow.
easy.
Do you change the way that you sing the songs during different performances? Are they pretty much, I mean, do you repeat the same thing next night, or do you feel it differently?
Yeah, I guess a bit differently actually. I guess with bands it was really playing the same set for about 6 months or whatever.
Yeah.
But with this, there's a lot more room to test the waters and see what works. So at the moment, a lot of my music's going real melodic, so I'm sort of figuring out how to actually do melodic stuff live rather than just kind of high-paced, loud rap music, you know. So really sort of seeing what works for me and my audience and going from there. So it's, you're able to feel the energy and kind of relate your set to whoever you're playing to.
It is fascinating to me because I know very little about it. You know, I mean, it just is. Now I know you've had 2 EPs out first, and you've completed an album too, right? And that's due for release pretty soon, correct?
Yeah. So we're looking at November, December release for the album. It's called Signs.
Fantastic. We wish you the best with that, of course.
Thank you.
Tell me then. So you've been in Freemasonry now for not that long a time, right?
2 years.
About 3 years, okay. What attracted you to it? Was a musician friend of yours said, hey, you should check out what the Freemasons stand for, the morality and the fortitude and prudence, all those sort of things. How did you fall upon Freemasonry in the world that you've been in?
Yeah, well, I've always sort of had an interest, I guess, really. I'm really into tradition. I'm Anglican by faith as well, so it's kind of similar as far as that goes. But really, one of my friends, Trent, in your lodge.
Yeah.
So we were living together in Mount Eden probably about 4 or 5 years ago, and we were just getting real into reading a lot of philosophy, looking at a lot of people from the Enlightenment era. I was sort of connecting with like being Filipino and stuff, looking into that, and a lot of the revolutionaries were Masons. So basically, all of these people that I was looking up to at the time sort of led me to, I don't know, just get chatting with Trent and be like, hey, you know,
Boom, boom.
I'd want to be a Freemason. He was like, me too. So we sort of made the step and
Fantastic.
applied together into it.
Now, I know that you probably admit yourself, and I think you did when we talked earlier, is that some of your earlier songs and stuff were around some of the troubles that youth face, and whether it be suicide, whether it be depression, whether it be a number of things. And so now with being a part of a Freemason world, where the thinking is really quite opposite that, into a sense that it's more of morality and virtues and things like that, how do you think that's going to play in your new songs that you will write, and how do you think that the audience, when they actually listen to the songs and hear perhaps a different slant on the message that you might be giving. I mean, do you think they will say that this is a message that they might want to hear, however you put it in the songs?
It's all development. As Freemasons, we're learning about growth. We're learning about becoming better selves and all of that. So my music, really, a big focus for me is the overarching narrative. Like, a lot of my music to begin with was quite dark, but coming out of that, and as far as like my life goes, I'm really trying to progress and trying to become a better person, and I want to be able to show that. And I think really, as people, as an audience, like you want to have hopeful music, you want to have a hopeful message, you want to have something to at least aspire to. Yeah. So that's really what I'm trying to get to.
You know, in the 60s, you know, we were a pop band, you know what I mean? But in the style that you're in now, there's sort of like hip-hop and there's rap and there's a lot of stuff like that. So what's the one word that you would sum yourself up and what do you do?
I'm a rapper.
You're a rapper.
Yeah.
Now listen, the rap music that I've heard has lyrics like you wouldn't believe. So in our time you had a verse, a chorus, a verse, a chorus. It was relatively straightforward. I mean, how do you remember so many of those aspects?
Oh, I write it.
Oh, that's true. That's
and I mean, it's the same as Freemasonry. Like, we have ceremony that we remember.
That's true.
A huge
too.
part of what I love about Freemasonry, and it's kind of the same. Like, I practice it the same. It's the same process of remembering things.
Fantastic. Rich, fantastic stuff, mate. You must be really enjoying how your career is going.
Yeah, I really
Look,
am.
we really wish you the best, mate, and thank you for being such a great Freemason. Look, you're a breath of fresh air. I just love seeing you in the lodge, mate. Thank you for being a guest here, mate. It's been great having you.
Cheers, thank you for having me.
Look forward to seeing you soon. Continuing our music theme this week, and to round out the show, is our regular contributor, Graham Houston, who's going to talk on the life of a famous Freemason, a famous American musician whose music we have all heard, but many of us would hardly know his name. Graham, it is great to see you.
Thanks, Barry.
Who are we talking about this week?
This week, John Philip Sousa.
Sousa, yes.
A great American composer, the great American patriot.
Was too.
A guy that wrote over 137 marches, operettas. He wrote endlessly for a 60-year period. And I guess that there would be hardly a person that has not heard John Philip Sousa's music. Even if you didn't know it was composed by him, because he wrote a lot of this back in 1880 in over a 60-year period. But almost every sporting event that you go to in America, if you get the big bands out, they are playing
His marches,
John Sousa's music.
We have all heard it every time. A big league game, a big football game, there it is.
It is. Now, he was a guy that started his musical career when he was about 7 years of age. He was a third of a family of 10, and I'm not sure when he recognised, but he had perfect pitch, or pitch perfect. And I believe that only happens in one in about 10,000 people, but he was one of them. He was always looking for a different sound. He was looking for something extra in music, and even to the extent where if the instrument wasn't available, he was going to develop an instrument for it.
And that's what he did, right?
He did. And together with an inventor, with his input, they developed the sousaphone, which was a bit of a combination of like a helicon and a tuba, I believe more lightweight, but it allowed the sound to go across the band, across the top of a band, and that was the sound that he was looking for at that stage.
And I think also too, right, because most of his music was marching, and they did march. He wanted something that they could carry.
They could carry.
Or if they were standing for a long time, they didn't fall down.
And if you watch some of these American college bands, they seem to have a cast of hundreds in them of instruments, and often there's a lot of those instruments in there. When he resigned from the Marine Band, and after his final concert, he went and set up his own band, the Sousa Band, and they travelled internationally as well as throughout America. And he was probably one of the greatest patriots that America has had. And you could say, well, how do you measure that? Well, it could be measured with Sousa by his music. And if you look at the title of a lot of the marches, just let me read you a couple of those ones that marches that he did, that he had there. America First, Hail to the Spirit of Liberty, the Invincible Eagle, the Messiah of Nations, Liberty Bell, and of course his most famous of all composition, Stars and Stripes Forever.
You know, talking about Hall of Honor, you know,
Yes.
I know that he was 1976, I think it was, he was posthumously inducted into the American Hall of Fame.
Yes, the American Hall of Fame there's only 102 people
Yep.
that have been inducted into that Hall of Fame. But also in 1998, he was inducted into the American Hall of Fame of American classical musicians.
Wow.
And so he had those two honours as well. We've talked about Sousa giving away his salary, but that seemed a little just typical of what we come to expect of people who are Masons, for he was a Mason.
Yeah.
So too was his father. Sousa was initiated in the Hiram Lodge number 10 in Washington in about 1881. He was initiated. He was passed and raised in the same lodge, and he was a member of that lodge for 51 years. He remained as a Master Mason. He did join about 1886 into the Royal Arch. He later on was in the Knights Templar, and finally in 1922 he joined the Shriners. Now, an interesting thing that came up about that band of his, when he formed that band, several members were Masons.
You expect that, wouldn't you?
And half the band was foreigners, what he called foreigners. By the time he finished with the band, 100% were Americans, part of that patriotism, and over half of the band were Shriners. So very much. And the Shriners organisation sponsored a lot of tours, a lot of concerts for the band throughout America. So he was very much a dedicated Freemason. One thing I didn't mention to you though, that Sousa had an abhorrence of recording. He didn't like the recorded music.
Wow.
He said recording would be the death of creative musical artistry in America, and he wasn't having any part of it. In fact, when the band did make recordings, very seldom, there may have been once or twice, was he ever the conductor. He would not do the conducting on it. He did not like recordings of music.
Wow. He said,
it was to be listened to and listened to live. And I guess the best one of all is in 1997, an Act of Congress was passed that named Stars and Stripes Forever as the National March of the United States. Some people did say that at some of the concerts, it was demanded that they play Stars and Stripes Forever. In fact, in some concerts, people would start to stand as if it was the national anthem, but it didn't become. He composed 137 marches, 15 operettas, 5 overtures, 11 suites, 24 dances, 28 fantasies, 322 arrangements of 19th century Western European symphonic works.
and 3 books.
And 3 books to go.
He was
That
busy.
was a great, great man and a great Freemason.
You know, we should march out tonight on that music. Couldn't we? We should
Why
march
don't
out
we do
tonight
that?
on
Why
that
don't
music.
Stars and Stripes Forever?
good
I
choice,
even
mate.
feel patriotic when I hear it.
Good choice. Thank you, Tony. So that's our show for this evening. Thank you for joining us. Remember, if you would like to know anything about Freemasonry, simply go to the website, which is freemasonsnz.org, or call the telephone number on the screen below. I look forward to seeing you next week.